First, though, let's go down to Westminster and talk to Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor, right now. Mel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. We better start off with the growth figures, I suppose. 0.1%, hardly pushing the boat out, really, is it? I mean, this would include, supposedly, everybody doing a lot of Christmas shopping in December.
Yeah, the economy is very flat, Mike, and has been since this government came into office. So you'll recall that during the general election, Labour talked a great game about growth. Once they came into power, I'm afraid they talked the economy down, which extinguished the sort of animal spirits and business confidence. You see that in all those business surveys. And of course, they had this disastrous budget in which they whacked up taxes, particularly on businesses, through national insurance. And I'm afraid we're now reaping the results. In fact, the Bank of England only last week, Mike, downgraded their forecast for growth this year, halving it. And that's the kind of predicament we're in, and that's really not going to be very good news for businesses or millions of people up and down the country when it comes to, you know, their wages, cost of living pressures and unemployment and so on.
No, exactly right. But Rachel Reeves' sort of answer to that OBR announcement coming out saying that basically £10 billion worth of a headroom space had been kind of lost and that she's basically run out of money is to launch a leak inquiry to find out how it managed to get into the public domain.
Well, yeah, it appears, and this is only speculation, of course, that there may have been a leak of the first cut of the OBR's forecast that they would have shared privately with the Treasury, and hence there being a leak inquiry underway. But I think what that tells you, Mike, is that it seems to suggest that what was leaked, if it was leaked, was possibly correct. That being that most, if not all, of the headroom that the Chancellor hitherto has had has simply evaporated. Now, if that is the case, then look, that's on her watch. That's because growth has been, almost non-existent. It's because she's taxed. It's because she's borrowed and spent in the way that Labour governments typically do. I'm afraid it's killing the economy. And if that headroom has gone, Mike, well, that means to your listeners who may be slightly bamboozled by all these arguments about fiscal headroom, it's the real impact is she may well have to come back at the end of March and have even tougher decisions to make around tax and spending as a consequence of her choices on the economy.
I mean, in terms of what she should be doing for the economy to make it move again, you know, obviously I imagine you and I would agree that putting up national insurance in April, which is going to happen, is not going to help. But what would you do? I mean, you're the Shadow Chancellor. I mean, because, I mean, if you could pull some levers right now to boost the economy, you know, turbocharge it so that by the beginning of spring, say, we'd actually see some proper growth, what would you do?
Well, she's got herself into a really tight bind, I'm afraid, Mike, because as I'm saying, the next step might be that she's actually got to create some more fiscal space, which, given that growth is virtually non-existent, leads you to tax and spending. So they are difficult choices. But to answer the question more broadly, what the government should have done is firstly taken very different choices on borrowing loads of money, on spending loads of money, which of course is driving up inflation, and on taxation, and certainly not be taxing the living daylights out of businesses. Secondly, they should have had a much clearer plan on productivity. In other words, if the government is spending money, our taxpayers' money, we should make sure that we get efficient outcomes as a result. So going around giving the train drivers 14% and junior doctors 22% and all that money going out the door with no strings attached, no requirement to improve output is completely wrong. And the final thing is welfare, Mike. We're spending far too much and we're forecast to spend even more on long-term sickness benefits, for example. We had a clear plan going to the election to get those costs down, 12 billion a year we would have been saving. That would have spared a huge amount of pain and allowed us to actually invest in growing our economy and getting productivity moving.
So are you saying all she can do now, all that's left for her now, is to put taxes up some more?
I think welfare is an option. Now, the government has been talking about welfare reform and getting people back to work. None of it, frankly, has added up to anything more than words, but we are told that there is shortly to be a further announcement on welfare. So one of the areas that I would be certainly looking at, in fact, we would have done by now as a government, as I've said, if we were in government, is to actually really get to grips with that welfare bill. And that could take some of the pressure off. But you can't get away, Mike, I'm afraid, with the fact that she's already driven the car into the ditch. So I'm afraid this starting point is not a very good one.
Right. Yesterday in Prime Minister's Questions, Kemi Badenoch asked Keir Starmer if he was going to close the loopholes that have allowed a Gazan family to gain access to this country because they've got a relative who's been living here for a long time and who's become a UK citizen, even though they appear to be using the loophole that allows people to come here from Ukraine. Starmer basically was woolly on it, as far as I can tell. He sort of denied being part of any decision-making that was part of the last government's problem. It turned out that wasn't true. It turned out this decision was handed down in January. But he says they're looking at closing the loophole. Doesn't mean he's going to close the loophole, does it?
Well, no. I mean, you know, Kemi, I thought did really well in the Prime Minister's questions, in as much as she pressed him 3 times in 3 questions as to whether he would appeal that court's decision to allow this absurd situation to persist of, as you say, a family from Gaza using the Ukraine route into the UK. Completely the wrong thing to be happening. And on 3 occasions, the Prime Minister failed to confirm that he would even appeal against this judgment. And, you know, this is just typical, I'm afraid, of the approach to issues of our national interest. You know, you think about the Chagos deal, for example. All of this smacks as a government that's not actually on the side of our nation, and that's completely wrong.
It really is. The sound is not great for us, I'm afraid, Mel. We're going to have to let you go, but thank you very much indeed. Mel Stride MP, Shadow Chancellor there, of course, as well, saying that basically there isn't enough evidence that this government can do anything about growth or to boost our economy whatsoever. But unbelievably, Rachel Reeves has tweeted this just in the last hour or so. For too long, politicians have accepted an economy that's failed working people. I won't. By taking on the blockers to get Britain building, investing in infrastructure and removing barriers to growth, we're going further and faster to get more pounds in people's pockets. I mean, as usual, with all issued government statements, they get ratioed to hell, and almost every single comment underneath that tweet is, you've got to be joking, haven't you? What on earth are you talking about?